just to one aspect or one particular part of the world. Wherever there is injustice, it is our duty and our role to speak out against that justice. So in terms of, when we talk about the global justice, the way I understand it, because my whole career and my activism is all based on the basis of global justice. It is not limited to any one particular group or any particular issue. It is about global justice, because at the base of it, I believe two things. Number one, I believe that global justice is an innate human call for conscience. This is something that we are born with. Our souls want justice everywhere. This is something that Allah has kept as a guide inside each and every one of us internally. When we say that, there is a sort of a prophet within ourselves, or a guide within ourselves, these are our own souls. The fitra that Allah's put inside us is to ensure that we speak out for the justice of every human being. And therefore, when sometimes, we are silent and we see injustice happening and oppression happening, and when we don't speak out, then that also is a form of injustice and oppression towards our own soul. So apart from whatever injustice is going on, when you don't speak out, it is you committing an oppression against yourself. And if we look at, for example, Dua Kumel that we recite every Thursday, in it we say, I have committed injustice towards my own soul. And this is something to really ponder about. It's not just word. When we talk about creating injustice to our soul, what does that mean? That means that, we can see, we can witness, we are part of a system that watches oppression happening to people around the world, but we keep quiet about it. When we keep quiet, then we are committing injustice and oppression towards our own soul. Now, in today's world, because of the materialism and because of so much corruption within the world, it dulls our consciousness. This innate need for justice within ourselves gets covered up because we are so busy in trying to become part of this worldly material world. So I think, that is one aspect of global justice. But on the part of faith, when we look at our practices as Shia Muslims, then the concept of global justice is part of our preparation for the coming of our Imam. And we know that our entire existence as Shia Muslims is geared towards preparing for the coming of the reappearance of Imam Mahdi. And Imam Mahdi's main role of coming into the world will be to bring global justice. This is everywhere, throughout the world. It is not only for, kept for Muslims or Shia Muslims or any one particular group of people. When Imam Mahdi comes, we believe very strongly that he will bring justice to every corner of the world. And therefore, in his absence, while we are waiting for him, it is our role to kickstart this process. Because if we don't align ourselves with these values of global justice, then when he comes, we will not be able to be part of him and be part of his journey. And I think we can go into depth later into this, but this is why you can explain that the wherever the Shia Muslim community is based, you see that they are particularly being hounded, whether it is Parachinar or it is in Lebanon, and fighting for the justice in Gaza. For example, Iran is a nation, and now we can see that happening even in the West. Not only are Muslims being subjugated to oppression, it is particularly the Shia Muslims who are being targeted. And this is because there is an understanding that this is a group of people who are based on the principle of Imam Hussein, and there is a continuous line between Imam Hussein to Imam Mahdi, and between that, this Shia community's main cause of existence is awaiting global justice, and therefore we've become the target. But inshallah, let's get into that a bit more after we've heard from Brother Fra.
Thank you so much, Sister Sakina, for sharing your point of view. Thank you so much, Farah, for joining us today, and thank you so much for waiting as well. I'm really grateful for your time. Farah, what are your thoughts on regarding global justice? As Sister has mentioned, we all share human values, as our conscience is, or spiritually, we all are same if we look at it in this way. And wherever the people with pure conscience lives, they speak the same language of love, humanity, respect, peace, and justice, and they don't like oppression, and they stand against it because they can't stand in favor of tyrant or something like that. So how do you see this? How important it is for us to uphold the values of justice and work for it, as you are also an independent activist and working for people of Gaza and everyone around the globe, wherever you see the tyranny or something like that. So what are your thoughts, how the situation is going, and what kind of values do we need to promote as a human being, no matter what we do, where we come from, because around the globe this is something happening everywhere. And I guess when personally I see this whole situation around the globe, I see like we all the people around the globe might come together who believe in the values of love and justice, and whose conscience are alive, for instance, and they can't sit idle without doing anything. So what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to join the show. And hello, Faiza. Hello, Sakina. Hello, everyone. I think what we could possibly do right at the very start is separate out or have a definition of what we call oppression. So, at the minute, when we're looking at the word headlines, we're looking at the oppression, the military occupation, the genocide in Gaza and in Lebanon and in Syria, and the fights and the attacks upon Iraq and Yemen. So you have military oppression, you have occupation, then you have financial oppression, you have the likes of the International Monetary Fund, and you have the World Bank. Some of these states and imperialism create sanctions on countries to push them into economic decline, economic distress. Then along comes the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund offering money in order to help the economy. And then they attach strings to this financial package where they say you will have to denationalize your oil, you will have to open up your health service to private companies, you're going to have to allow foreign investment to come into the country. And what they actually do is steal the resources of the targeted country in order to fill the coffers of the West. If you look back in history, oppression of other nations and other peoples has always been around resource theft. So the colonization of Africa, the colonization of Latin America and the Caribbean, the colonization of parts of West Asia, India, Pakistan, China, they were all used to take those natural resources from those countries, pay those people a pittance, and the global West has been born on the impoverishment and the enslavement and the colonization of the global South. So oppression has many, many, many faces. It has many, many, many names. Now, I just touched on the international aspects of oppression, like the Zionist state entity oppressing, ethnically cleansing, genociding the people in Gaza, and indeed the West Bank. And they have just taken over or have plans to take over the Christian sector in East Jerusalem. They're just going to throw out the Orthodox churches and sequester their property and assume their money. So that's like state oppression, which is external. But I look at oppression as discrimination, as prejudice, as racism, as fascism. So you can look internally into every country and you'll see the rise of fascism across the Western political sphere. Because what we're having is a reaction to neoliberalism, where you have had this great disparity of wealth between the super rich and the super poor, and people are rejecting these neoliberal agendas. And sadly, the people who have positioned themselves as the opposition to neoliberalism are the likes of Make America Great Again, the likes of Trump, the likes of Elon Musk, We have now all across Europe, there seems to be a group to make France great again, make Austria great again, make Britain great again. And I dare say back in the day, Hitler said, let's make Germany great again. So we have the rise of the right, which is going to push society into greater divisions. The right and fascism is really the foot soldiers and the vanguard of imperialism and capitalism. So oppression can start in the home, it can move out into society. It can start from the government down. So I live in a society that is fractured along sectarian lines. I live in the north of Ireland where we have pro-British colonial settlers who want to remain British, and we have the indigenous Irish population who want to reunify the country of Ireland. I had a friend several years ago from the Donbass, from Luhansk, who came to Belfast. I showed him the peace walls. I showed him how people live in separated communities. I told him the story and history of Ireland for the last 800 years living under oppression, but I kind of focused from 69 to 99. And when I explained all this, he said to me, but this is Western Europe. This is the European Union. This is where we are told in Ukraine is the land of milk and honey, and how we should join NATO and how we should join the EU. And yet here we have in the heart of the EU fractured, separated sectarian society. So as I say, oppression wears many masks, and the media, the mainstream media, plays a huge part in promoting these values which are designed to separate us. So when we're talking about people of goodwill, we're talking about people who have a moral compass. We're talking about people who want to fight inequality. They murdered Malcolm X. They murdered many people like Patrice Lumumba and Allende in Chile. They murdered Che Guevara. These and they murdered Said Hassan Nasrallah. These people are our icons and our heroes. These are the people that we should aspire to be like. These are the people who have shown us the way forward when it comes to unity. And these people were warriors that I'm speaking of. These people were not necessarily pacifists, but they wanted peace and justice and dignity in the world. They wanted all the equality for everyone, regardless of their religion, their colour, their race, their ethnicity, or their politics. And these people have all been murdered by the imperialist deep states. So when we talk about unification, when we talk about bringing people of goodwill together, the problem there is that you are seen to be an enemy of the state. And like Julian Assange, there will be false accusations, you will be put in jail, you will be put in isolation to try and break you mentally, psychologically, and emotionally. And the likes of Leonard Peltier, who has just been released. I mean, the whole world knows that man was innocent. These were false charges brought against him in order to make a political impact upon the Indian nation and their political activists at that time. So what we have is imperialism, capitalism, colonialism of the dividing forces across the world. It's going to be very hard to unite people in global justice if they are not already involved in trying to change the state structures within their own nation. And you have the whole paraphernalia of the media, the deep state, the bought and paid for corrupt politicians. It's an uphill battle, but every one of us must do what we can. Programs like this, programs like Sakina has on Press TV, Women in Struggle, very important concepts, very important to get the word out, very important to educate people through just telling them the facts and giving them not an alternative view of geopolitics, but telling people the truth from a moral compass. And that moral compass can be political through socialism and communism, and it can be religious through Shia Muslims, through Christians, through Judaism, which had such a huge longevity when it came, I believe, to human rights and standing against oppression. And so sad to see the Zionists take Judaism and turn it into the monster that it has become as the Jewish state uses violence to impose its will upon the people of Gaza.
Thank you, Farah, for sharing your regarding like and different forms and shapes. And it is really important to understand what shapes does it have. Sometimes it come in different colors and shapes, as you mentioned. Sakina, how when the duties towards the justice, when we are struggling for justice, we want peace on this earth, we want truth to be leading the people, and we want peace and justice and humanity to be winning, not the not the oppressive values going on in different form and shapes, which look like peace and justice, but they are not actually. So how do you see when it comes to alliance with the Zionists? Sometime when we as we have been looking at different news regarding as alliance with Zionists, for instance. So what are your thoughts on that? Can we get justice by having an alliance, whether it's the Arab Muslim Zionist leaders alliance with them, or whether it's anyone who is actually in who is actually a Zionist, and we think no, he is good or whatsoever. So what are your thoughts on that? How important it is for us when we are trying to do some kind of interfaith activity? How important it is for us to keep that in mind, that we don't shake hand with Zionists, whether they are Muslim, whether they are anyone from any community, because we don't hate any people from any community, but the Zionist itself is an ideology which has these elements of supremacy, these elements of hatred, and these elements of thinking that they are super people and they have the right, and everyone. So what are your thoughts on that?
So, on the surface of it, interfaith is a very noble, thought and practice, because this is something that is taught to all the people of the book. That we need to. We are all believers in God, and therefore, even with any community of faith,
Mm.
having good relations, talking together. Cultivating things that are common, especially in a world that is increasingly becoming ungodly, is on the surface of it a very positive thing. However, when we talk about interfaith in the present context, in the political context, we know it is proven. Professor David Miller has done a study on this, and revealed that most of the interfaith activities that happen in the UK in particular at the moment are sponsored by the state of Israel. These are sponsored by Zionists, and the whole aim of these interfaith relations are actually to ensure that we stop speaking out against whatever crimes that Israel commits, and to normalize Zionism here in the West. Because as we are aware, the Zionist lobby is very, very strong, and they try and control the all mainstream media, all mainstream politicians. The only thorn is activists and people of faith who speak out, and that is the reason why today people around the world are aware of the genocide that happened, because there were a few people who were not part of the system who decided that they weren't going to keep quiet. So these interfaith, alliances are meant to actually control any opposition to Zionism. And we recently have seen, which is a big issue at the moment, these accords that have been signed, by Shia leader, Sheikh Razawi heading it, and along with the Zionist rabbis. Now, this is a very serious matter in my view, and I think specifically for the audience, this particular audience, it is very important to understand the whole context behind this. Sheikh Razavi has a history of working with a lot of Zionist rabbis here in the UK. It is not a one-off thing. 10 months ago, when these accords were being written and being discussed, this was during a live genocide that was going on. Again, there is a lot of misconception that what has just been agreed about is things like, working together towards kosher halal rights, about controlling Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. It isn't. When you look at the wordings of actually the accords, it is a very political statement. This ensures that, for example, there are in it things like, when there is a foreign issue happening, first of all they talk about tensions in the Middle East. What is happening in the Middle East is not tensions. What is happening in the
Hmm.
Middle East is genocide. One group is committing genocide over the others. So when you use terms such as tensions between different factions, this in itself tells you that you are trying to watershed, you are trying to clean the other side by using words like this. And also, Sister Faiza, there is a lot of information that is not public yet, but the people behind these accords were actually the Zionist lobby. And Sheikh Razavi, to some extent, people are asking, how could he have gone ahead and done this? Now, this is not proven, and I can't say it with authority, but the information reaching us tells us that he was threatened because there is information about him that the Zionists have got, that they were going to make public, and he was pressurized into becoming part of it. And not only him, other Shia institutions, other Shia groups in the country are also being threatened falsely by, either being told that your mosques are under threat, and therefore if you don't sign this, you're going to be facing a lot of closure of mosques, you're going to be, you might get attacked in your mosques. These are not substantiated facts. The other is on individuals, people who are leading these institutions. They have got things in the closet, and the Zionists are very good at ensuring that they've got this material of individuals with which they can threaten people, and therefore you see some of our leaders succumb to these kind of threats and then agree to have these kind of accords and associations. But it is a wake up call for all of us, for all the people who are fighting for global justice, that we have to really be careful. And whether it is a scholar who's adorning, these clothes that giving them a scholarly a presence, and anyone, whether it is a Shia, any Muslim, whether it's Christian priests, whether it is Jewish rabbis, this is not an era where we take people on face value. We have to look at what is it and who is behind them. The whole interfaith that is happening in the Western world is compromised. The money that comes from it is the Zionist money. These people were locked up in a castle in Scotland, enjoying the hospitality of imperialist state with Zionist agendas. And then the pictures that we have seen, how could possibly anyone claiming to be speaking for truth, for values or godly values, ever be seen to be shaking hands, to be breaking bread with hardcore Zionists? The rabbi, for example, the chief rabbi who was part of this, who was shaking hands with Sheikh Razavi, his son is serving in IDF in Israel. He has spoken many times about the fact that what is happening in Gaza is justified. How could he possibly be part of these accords? It is really time for people to look at these things deeply, and not only just look at them but to oppose them. Refuse such scholars from sharing our pulpits, to sit on our pulpits. Make a distance and say, we are not going to accept to be part of this. And this is true in every faith. You have got Zionism, not just Jewish Zionism. Zionism exists everywhere. You have got Christian Zionism, you have got Muslim Zionism. The ISIS and what we see happening in Syria is a Muslim Zionism, and therefore now we are seeing aspects of Shia Zionism. This is something that I think all of us really need to be aware of and need to distance ourselves from.
Thank you, Sister Sakina. Farah, what are your thoughts when we come to, as Sister Sakina has mentioned some facts about the alliance with the Zionist entity in terms of sharing interfaith dialogue or whatsoever, accord or agreements on, like to have peace and this and that. So, do you see, like, I mean, you are not, for instance, Muslim. You are not, I mean, associated with Ahlul Bayt in one way. But as a human, as an activist, as a independent journalist, and as an independent thinker, what are your viewpoint on that? Like, can we do that? Like, to shake hand with Zionists and stand up with them in unity for bringing peace and this and that. And as Sister mentioned, like the wording used in that accord is tension. It's not tension, it's the ethnic cleansing. It's very clear. And from Trump perspective, we all know that he is also trying to do that, and he wants to do it. When we come to Iran, for instance, the at the moment Zionist entities are trying to attack them in whatsoever way, in whatsoever manner. I mean, from their nuclear program perspective. So, how do you see that? Like, for example, as an we are just stating the facts. Like Iran, for example, is an independent state. They do have their own ideology to run their country and their people and whatsoever. So, don't you see that they like, if for example Israel has threats from XYZ country, so don't you see that, like, for example, is Iran as an independent country has also the right to, you know, keep itself safe from XYZ entities, which from which he has threats to be attacked or something like that. And if they think about it, why they don't have right to think for themselves, or any other country, let's suppose any other country from Africa, from any other country around the globe, why they can't think independently, decide for themselves, and they have to take permission from, for example, America, for example, the word so-called those leaders who are also behind the Zionist entity, or who are the actually running these Zionists in effective. You may mention these things in with more clarity. So, what are your thoughts on that? So, how do you see the situation going? For example, from both perspective, one the related to alliance with the Zionist, and the other one, for example, if the Zionist entity want to attack, for example, Iranian nuclear programs or something like that. How do you see the situation from that perspective as well?
Well, first, I'd like to say I found what Sakina was saying fascinating. It fits into so many different levels of what the Zionist cabal does. There's this whole idea, and Mossad used to have a phrase, victory through deception. And when you think of Epstein, and you think of Epstein's Island, and you think of all those politicians and all those influencers and members of the royal family and others, you wonder how compromised they are. You wonder what videos were secretly recorded of what happened on that fantasy island of Epstein, for which he was obviously killed in prison, so he couldn't go into court, name names, and embarrass the whole political structure from, I assume, the likes of Clinton all the way through to Prince Andrew in the British monarchy. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Israeli security people and security services have leverage on practically every Western political leader. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be blackmail. We've heard about the honey traps. We've heard about different situations that are created and then people are compromised. If you think of even the guy Vanuhu, the whistleblower on the Israeli, funny we were talking about the nuclear reactors. I mean, he blew the whistle on the nuclear reactors. He was in London or somewhere, and then he was enticed through a female operative, I think, to Paris. Then he was kidnapped, and the next minute he found himself drugged inside an Israeli prison. So there is an undercover, undercurrent blackmailing operation. I think anyone who has a high public profile, I think they dig into their backgrounds to see if they've been involved in paedophilia, if they've been involved in wife beating, if they've been involved in any improper behaviour, which should actually be brought before the court We talked about justice earlier, so that the people who are the victims of these crimes can receive justice. So I've no doubt that many leaders, politically and in the mainstream media and in other places, some have been bought by the Israeli lobby, and others have been compromised, blackmailed, and otherwise have leverage to be used upon them. Uh, we had something similar here when we had an armed militant revolution against the British occupation. People who were involved in that, who then had skeletons in their cupboards. The security services would just simply say, you can either go to jail for 20 years or we're going to destroy your reputation in the public unless you work for us. So I'm not surprised to hear that potentially about anyone being involved with the Zionist lobby. The reason why the Zionist lobby wants people with religious influence is just like the mainstream media and just like the politicians, it's a control issue. If you can get the leader of Islam in Britain to maybe say that if you're anti-Zionist, you are anti-Jewish, and to maybe say that people should believe in the IHRC definition of anti-Semitism, then what you're doing is you are putting a straitjacket on anyone who wants to speak out about the genocide. Like the way they address this up is they'll say, I'm a follower of God. I believe in justice. I believe in equality. I believe in truth, and I believe in brotherly love. And the only way to bring this forward is to have these inter-religious conferences where we're showing brotherly love to a brotherly religion. But if it is being used as a weapon to stifle criticism of Israel during a genocide, well, obviously we shouldn't have any contact with people who are pro-Zionist. The whole establishment, if you look at Germany and what they're doing to pro-Palestinians, people flying flags, people occupying buildings, people on the streets. I mean, they're brutalizing people, they're arresting them, they're putting them in prison. They're trying to end all dissent. This is an authoritarian, almost dictatorship. We'll call it a democratic dictatorship in Germany to prevent people speaking out against genocide and these atrocities. So this is all the way across the West. It's only getting worse. We've seen counter-terrorism used here against people like Richard Medhurst, against people like Craig Murray. People who stand up to tell the truth are actually being threatened with imprisonment. They're being threatened with their civil rights being taken away. When it comes to Iran, I know I was in Tehran at the end of 24, start of 25, at a conference on Palestine. And people there were talking about whether or not Iran should have a nuclear bomb. Now, Israel's got 420. The only reason why North Korea has not been attacked other than financial sanctions is because it has a nuclear bomb. Now, I understand the religious reasons why there was a fatwa that it shouldn't be used because it destroys not just combatants, but it destroys the innocent, it destroys infrastructure, it destroys nature. It is an abomination. The nuclear bomb is an abomination. But the only country in the world who have used it is the Americans. And they didn't just use it once, they used it twice. And it wasn't to end the war against Japan. It was as a threat to the Soviet Union to say, look, at the power we have, we can do this to you that we have done to the Japanese. Look at the countless decades of babies being born with deformities due to radiation poisoning, the half-life of the radiation poisoning, 500 years, 1,000 years, 5,000 years. Fallujah in Iraq, people are still suffering from the spent uranium that was used by the Americans and the British in that illegal war. So when it comes to the fatwa in Iran, I have a different opinion. Every country that has a nuclear bomb says we do not intend to use this. This is a defensive weapon. This is as you attack us and we feel that we are going to be annihilated, we will fight with atomic weapons. So every country who has them says they're not going to use them, they're purely for defense. So I see no reason why Iran could not have a nuclear deterrent. It can say publicly, we're not going to use it. It can say we have a fatwa. It's against our religious morality to use it. But the way I explained it in Tehran was, if I have a dog in my house and you come to my house and I say, it's a friendly dog, it's not going to bite you, you're going to think twice before you come into my home because I have a dog. So even if Iran was to say publicly, globally, we're not going to use it, but we'll have it, I think that would make people think twice before they would attack Iran in a full out onslaught. Now, the contraindication is, if you go to get it, is that going to push others to attack you so that you don't have it? Or because of the security pact with Russia, could it be a simple case of asking the Russians to put some a nuclear deterrent on the ground in Iran, maybe potentially under the supervision of the Russians? It's just, if Israel has them, if America has them, France, Britain, Pakistan, China, and India, if they all have them, and North Korea, uh, to really finish off what you asked, who are any of these countries to tell the Iranian people what they can and cannot do in their own country? This is this white Anglo-Saxon supremacist ideology that I was going to say might is right, because it's always been a case of superior military technology that wins the war. Israel's only superior in West Asia because of its air force. It can bomb anybody, anywhere, and nobody has the capability really to withstand that. But I will change might is right to white is right, because this is what this is. This is racism. This is Anglo-Saxon Christian, I dare say, imperialism, because once upon a time they said they were bringing civilization and Christianity to the heathens and the barbarians, and they still have this idea that I can't remember who said it, but they said that Europe is the garden of the world and everywhere else is a jungle. So they see other people as monkeys, they see them as apes, they see them as animals, and they see themselves as somehow the circus masters and the ringmasters of the world. And they're still using a 17th century colonial imperialist mentality, except today they have 21st century munitions to force their ideals and foreign policies on the other nations, and sanctions, which will end when BRICS finally takes its rightful place on the world stage, and they stop using the petrodollar and the dollar as the reserve currency. Then the sanctions will prove ineffective as other countries come together in a global alliance, not of peace and justice, but it is possible that through that alliance, peace and justice might finally come.
Thank you for sharing your viewpoint on that situation, as well as how are dealing with this word and using might is right and dividing and forcing people to do their job whatsoever, and in whatever manner. Sister Sakina, how would you like to conclude? What challenges do we have as a uh, as for example all those people who are activists and who want peace and justice and truth to be leading this world, not the Zionist or imperialist or colonial powers in different forms and shapes, to be like suppressing their rights and resources of the human beings. Like, these are the kind of people who just want to like want people to pay even for the water they drink, and even for the maybe in upcoming days the sunlight they have around them. So for example, that kind of time would also be coming, in which they would ask, if you are having a fresh air you need to pay, and if you are having a fresh sunlight, then you have to pay, for example, because you stand up in the sunlight for an hour and you consumed it, for instance, like that. So these are the kind of people who are like called as political elite, or maybe the elite behind these politicians. I'm not sure, as deep state is also there, and there are so many forms of political power. So what actual power these people have, and what actual obstacles do we have? How would you like to conclude on what areas do we need to work as a human rights activist, for instance, all those who wants to work like that?
I would conclude in the same way that I started by saying that, what we are working towards is actually global justice. Now, I think I would like to make this very clear that, when we are talking of global justice, as British citizens, we are not talking, for example, when we are discussing what is happening in the Middle East or Iran, because we are a target for people who want to, their interest is capitalism and imperialism, and do not want anyone to oppose Zionism, they will quickly link us and say that we are foreign agents, or we are being, speaking, and therefore we are not patriotic. Especially Fra might get away with it a little bit because of the color of his skin, but people like you and me, Pfizer, we are very quickly, targeted. That we are not patriotic towards our nation. And I would like to conclude by saying that every fight that we are uptaking at the moment for global justice is actually because we are patriotic to our nation. Whatever evil that happens, which has a hand, the cooking of it is done here in Britain, concerns us as citizens of this country. Balfour Declaration was born here in Britain, and therefore, as British citizens, we have a responsibility towards what is happening in the Middle East. And the same, when we are talking about Zionism, it is actually the Zionists who are a foreign entity who have control over this government and not any other foreign nation. So what is happening, this issue of BBC documentary that is in the news right now, whereby, BBC has been so anti Palestine. They have been supporting the Zionist agenda all along throughout the genocide. And we saw the editor from the Middle East who was actually whitewashing everything was happening, in Gaza. But today they have actually managed to take out one documentary whereby a 14-year-old is talking simply about life in Gaza. And the Zionists are up in arms because there is a link of this boy to Hamas, even though he himself is a 14-year-old and has got no contact with any organization himself. And you've got literally LBC, when I was listening to it yesterday, from morning to night, every radio broadcaster was harping on and on about this documentary. Now the Israeli ambassador has launched a complaint, open complaint, and there is so much effort to try and take this documentary off, their website. So you can see what we are facing here. Who is the foreign entity who is actually controlling not just the political establishment in Britain, but all the mainstream media in Britain? It is not Iran, it is not the Middle East, it is actually Israel, Zionist lobby that is controlling. And so for those of us who are British and are fighting for global justice, our aim is just to really listen to our own conscience, to listen to this guide within our own human nature, which is innate in all of us, that when we see oppression happening anywhere, the voice has to come out. We have to speak because this is a godly, righteous things to do. And so, just conclude that by saying that the biggest threat, I think, to the world, to the globe, but also to this nation is the Zionist lobby. And therefore, we should not in any manner become a part of that. Whatever it takes, whether it is threats to our lives, to our mosques, whether it is a threat to our own security of any sort, of our livelihood, we cannot afford at this juncture to be part of this Zionist entity or of the Zionist lobby in any manner. Fighting this, especially as a Shia Muslim, is what aligns you to the coming of your Imam. And we are told, we are told that before the coming of the Messiah, there will be a lot of sifting happening because there is a divide. You have to divide between the people who are good and who are not good, people who will join the army of the righteous and those who will not. And this is the sifting happening. So for every one of us, it is our responsibility to consciously make that decision on which side we want to be, whether we want to be on the side of the truth, of justice, of the path of Imam Mahdi, or on the other side.
Thank you so much, Sister Sakina. Thank you, Farah, for joining us today. I'm really grateful for your time and patience. and I'm really honored. And to the viewers, I would say, like, injustice anywhere is threat to justice everywhere. So that's the thing we need to work on. We all share human global in values, and we do have conscience. So the all people whose conscience is awakened and alive, they think in the same way, and they would work for truth, justice, and humanity and peace for everyone, no matter which color, creed, race, and region somebody come from. We all have to stand united against all the oppression going on around the globe anywhere. Thank you so much for watching. Look after yourself. Allah Hafiz.